agent, Joe Cohen, who was here, said, why don't you try doing something that you got into this business to do? And when I was a kid, my favorite movie was Carnal Knowledge. So I put Carnal Knowledge and plastic surgery together. And that became Nip Tuck, and it really could only air on 2 networks. And I went to FX, and they bought it in the room, and I wrote it, and we were shooting the pilot like 3 months later. So, and then it got on the air 2 months later. So it happened very quickly, but that's how it happened.
And it was always, cable was always the appropriate home for it. You never thought about broadcast TV?
Oh, it could never. No, no, and I had just come from doing a sitcom pilot. They kept saying, you're funny, you should do a sitcom. And I was like, I don't want to do a sitcom. And they were paying me money, and I had to do it. And after that, I became an anarchist. And I'm like, I'm going to write like an ass implant that's so bloody. And I wanted to sort of transform my own life. And I thought the way to do that would be to do something really gritty and raw, and it had to be cable.
And FX has kind of had that reputation of being edgy programming and stuff, so they must have really embraced it when you kind of pitched it in the room.
They did. You know, the reason I wanted to go there is they had just come out with The Shield. And this was a show that at the core of it, I always say it was a love story between 2 heterosexual men. And I loved The Shield, and I thought, well, they would really get this. And the only places that I thought it could go would be FX or HBO, and I chose FX, and it had a happy ending. But yeah, I mean, I thought that they were just starting then. So yeah, that was their first big hit. FX had just gotten into dramatic programming.
Right. Talk a little bit about the casting. Did you have kind of people in mind when you were writing, or how did the audition process work?
He had me in mind from the get-go.
It was a very interesting thing.
Only Cuban.
Before, it was written for a Cuban.
I've
got a big... Let's not talk about that.
I had actually started writing the pilot, and I only thought of one person. I was writing the Sean scene, and I went into my den, and I had literally wrote one scene. And I turned on an HBO movie, and there was Dylan. And he was so miserable in that movie. I could just tell that he was like, I want to do something. And I had loved him so much in Nobody's Fool. So I actually wrote that part for him. The only part that I wrote for someone in that pilot. And I finished the pilot. The day we got greenlit, I went with Mike and Greer, and we went to Kings Road Cafe, and there was Dylan Walsh sitting in the cafe. I walked up and I said, he was reading the New York Times or something, and I said, you don't know me, but I wrote this pilot, and you're going to be getting it. And he said, what? Who, what? Thanks. Really incredibly rude. It's so rude that I was like, screw him.
I thought you were the waiter.
The waiter. I was wearing shoes like this at the Kings Road Cafe. And so he came in the next day, and he was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I was obsessed with Roma Maffia's dialogue with Demi Moore in Disclosure, to the point where I would recite it to friends. So when she came in, I said, I want to do the scene for you, and I did the whole Roma versus Demi. So she thought I was
better
crazy.
than I.
Julian's part was written for a Latin male, actually. And Julian came into the room and was Julian, and I thought, well, that's very interesting, and I turned it over his resume, and it said Givenchy Man of the Year. And I was immediately hooked. And it was one of those things, because that was done, I did not think of, I really had thought it was Miami, and with the network, and I had talked about it, but Julian was so fantastic, we kept bringing him back. He had to come back like 6 times.
16.
A lot. And they wouldn't see him, and he made his own. We wouldn't see him, and he made his own audition tape, and he really wanted it. And every time he came in, I just kept thinking, well, I can't really picture anybody else. And John came in and was the immediate, I think, choice after he read, because he blew everybody away. It was a very difficult part. And Kelly was very interesting, because Kelly was a model and had just started to act. And it was not a very big part in the pilot at all. In fact, it was only going to be the pilot and then out. And I was so moved by her. When I directed the pilot, and when I was directing the pilot, she had to have a breakdown scene. And it was very, very difficult because she had to cry and she had all these bandages on her face, and Roma was off camera like doing like actor's studio stuff to get her to cry. It was brilliant. And I kept imitating how I wanted Kelly to act so much that I got a nosebleed. I got too excited, and we bonded. And then I was so taken by her that we kept writing it, and then she became a regular. So that's sort of how. And Jolie was. Mike and I were.
What about the bit where I had to tap her on the ass?
In the pilot?
Yeah.
Well, there were so many of those scenes. Which? And Jolie was somebody, that was the very difficult part, because a lot of women, big actresses in town, read that part and said, I will not do this because of the nudity. They didn't really get it. And we got a call, Mike and I were in New York from casting, and we got a call from Jolie Richardson's manager saying, Jolie read this pilot and she doesn't do TV, but she can't stop thinking about it, and will you meet with her? So we said yes, and Mike and I met her, and Mike read Sean's part and Dylan's part, and that was kind of it. I mean, she was just so, we were lucky to get her. And
a small anecdote on that. We were told that we would be able to meet with Jolie, and she had literally flown in from Toronto to New York, jumped in a car to come meet us at our hotel to talk to us. And Ryan was like, they just said she'll meet. And he goes, I'm going to get her to read. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I think it's just a meeting. And he's like, no, I'm going to get her to read. Mm-hmm. And so we were talking downstairs, and then finally Ryan said, so could we go upstairs and maybe read the scenes a little bit? And she was like, sure, let's go. And we got upstairs, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to end up reading these scenes. This is going to be horrible.
It was some good time.
And sure enough, Ryan goes, okay, Mike, you read these parts with her. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm sitting here reading with Jolie Richardson. I cannot believe it. And I'm just hacking up Ryan's words. It evolved like that.
And then we said thank you, and then it was interesting because when you do a show like this, you have to appease the network in the studio, and everybody that we had to come into those rooms, and there were several candidates. But it was very clear, like Dylan was the guy, and Julian was the guy, and John was the guy, and Roma, it was just very clear to me, and I think everybody else, once they finished the audition, we all turned to each other and said, that's the person, and it was kind of effortless in that way,
Starting with Kelly, maybe we could work our way down the line. What was your first impression of what you saw the script, and kind of how do you see as your character has developed over the years? Where's your character been? Where is it going? What do you like about your character?
That's a lot of questions. Well, when I started, they told me they were going to push the envelope, and I didn't know what that meant. I thought, sure, why not? So much has happened with Kimber. It's kind of gone by so fast. I've been sort of pummeled by the character. But what's so great about it is that I literally play a different person every year. I know it's Kimber, but she has a new facade, new personality, new lover, and it's a different person, and it's really refreshing. And I always look forward to, for one, every script, because I know I'm going to be really nervous, because I always am. I always wonder how I'm going to get through the day. Somehow I seem to. And then every year I look forward to it, because it's going to be something completely new, and it always challenges me. And like Ryan said, I was one of the greener ones on the show, so I was always very nervous and very scared, and I think I'm sort of used to it now and welcome the challenge.
Roma?
Go ahead, it's your turn.
Your turn. Your turn.
Okay, good. How's it going?
Yeah, where do you see how's your character changed over the years? And
Well, what I remember the most from the pilot was one morning. It was very early. It was like 6 in the morning, and I was looking at myself in the makeup mirror, and Ryan came in and he goes, how would you feel about having a love scene naked with a woman? And I realized it was 6 in the morning, and I thought, I want to keep my job. So I said, I'd do it. And then I said, but I'll tell you what you get. I got forewarning, so I can work everything out. You get a leg, one leg, and an arm. And the rest is a sheet. Sorry. How it's so amazing. It's like